It's December 10th, 2013. We're sitting with CEO and founder of Find the Best, Kevin O'Connor. Thanks for joining us. And basically, we wanted to get a little glimpse of the starting point in an entrepreneur's life. An entrepreneur that has built several companies, most significantly DoubleClick, and now you're on the path of another, what will probably be a very big success story as well, Find the Best. When did you realize you wanted to be an entrepreneur? What age did the light bulb go off?
So, I don't think I even knew what the word entrepreneur existed till maybe 22, 23 years old. So I knew I was an inventor probably when I was 12, 13 years old. I used to go and rip apart TV sets I'd pick up over garbage night. Thursday nights, I still remember my favorite night, garbage night outside Detroit. People would throw away all sorts of radios, TVs. It was just a gold mine.
Wow. And so you would pick them apart and rewire things, or just kind of figure out how they all were set
I would just
up?
take out components, and my first big invention, I found out if you take a transformer that I ripped out of a TV, and I would always take stuff and hook it up to a battery, see what happens, and I hooked this thing up to a battery, and it gave me this huge shock, electrocuted me, threw me across the room. I'm like, yes,
Wow.
I invented something cool, and I used it to, this raccoon used to tip over my garbage cans. It used to piss me off because I'd take garbage and strew it all over the place, and that was my job. I was the garbage boy. So I created this contraption that it would electrocute the raccoon.
Wow, fantastic.
And mess with my cans. So fixed it.
Did the product ever go to market?
You went to market in one instance.
Okay.
And it worked.
Awesome.
Market validation. Raccoon never came back.
Yeah, but at that early age, did you get
Didn't die,
encouragement from your parents? Were they telling you go and discover things and open things up, or was it more on your own?
My dad was electrical engineer. He was a huge encouragement. Even when I didn't try to burn the house down. When I almost burnt the house down a few times, he was cool with that.
Okay. And then, when was the first time you really started to connect with somebody who was guiding you and encouraging you to start your own company or to consider going down that path from a career point of view?
Really, I was going to go get my PhD. I was going to go work for Bell Labs, pick up a couple of Nobel Prizes, and that was my whole plan. And a guy, Bill Miller, called me when I was in college. We had interned together at TI, and he had talked about starting a company together. We're going to hook up PCs to mainframes. He had already hooked up the Apple to the Burroughs mainframe. And I had worked on a project at IBM on one of the first PCs, so I was one of the foremost experts on the planet on the IBM PC, just because I happened to get into it first. I happened to have a cool internship with IBM, but and we decided to start a company.
Did it seem like a big risk at the time?
Not really. I had lots of job offers. Electrical engineers, computer science was in hot demand, and I figured I could always fall back on that. I had nothing to my name. I was living poor in college, so I could continue living poor.
Right, why not? At that young age. And then you started that company and you developed it for a while. How did that end up?
So that was ICC. We grew up to about $35 million. We had about 95% market share, and we sold it to a company called DCA down in Atlanta about 10 years later.
Okay.
So it was good.
Yeah.
It was a good first solid hit. One thing I learned very early on is if you're going to pick a market, pick a big one. We crushed it in that market, but it was a very small market. It was a $40 million market.
Mm-hmm. So at that point, you had the entrepreneurial bug. You were not going to go and work for anyone else. You weren't going to be an employee. That was pretty clear.
Yeah, it wasn't that clear. We got acquired, and I went down and worked at DCA for 3 years. I was quite happy. I thought I would leave right away, but I was VP of research and got to invent new products, and it was kind of nice inventing products in a bigger company. We had resources.
What was the most significant shift between running the company as an entrepreneur, as an owner, and then shifting into an employee? Did you notice yourself working less hours, being able to leave it at the office by the end of the day, or was there another shift?
I don't know. Because my first company, I was VP of research. I was just a kid, and I was really just coding all day and developing products. So nothing really changed. But probably the biggest shift is I actually became a manager at the second company. So that was probably the biggest shift.
Okay.
Definitely when it's your company, you're involved with more decisions. It's more. What am I trying to to say. I mean, it's different, but
Yeah.
not hugely so. I mean, I've always loved technology, whether I got paid for it or not. So to me, it didn't really matter.
In that first company, where you were basically in charge as one of the owners, and even though you were focused on just the research part of things, did you start developing some self-awareness about what you were really good at and what you were maybe not very good at, what your levels of capacity were with what you wanted to be doing, what you weren't, necessarily equipped to do?
Yeah, I mean, I always tell folks here, I mean, people are always in a hurry to get into management. I didn't manage anyone for 10 years. I love technology. I love coding. I coded for 16 hours a day, and I was really good at it. And I knew technology, understood it. And it took me, a while to mature. I definitely was not a good manager. Was not a good leader.
So, as far as in your 20s, when you were running your company and even though you were just focused on research, were there any? Did you discover anything about yourself? Any capacity, any strengths, any weaknesses, things that became part of that entrepreneurial process?
Yeah, I mean, there's a few things I learned. One is that a lot of people are in a hurry to get into management, and it's a big mistake, because to be a manager, you have to be really technically proficient. Now, it turned out I was a terrible manager, and I was really good at programming. So spending all my time developing software, developing new products, was really, really useful. So when I eventually did make that shift 10 years later into management, I was technically very proficient. And I think, if you're going to run a technology company, you're going to be CEO of a technology company, you better have a very, very strong foundation in technology.
Right. And so, but at the beginning, in your 20s, you were not a good manager.
No, I was a terrible manager.
What made you a bad manager?
Like one of the guys who, Dwight Merriman, who's a pretty famous entrepreneur now, he told me, I had asked him to move down to, I was interviewing him and asked him to move down to Atlanta to be part of this research group. And I said, "What have you heard about me?" And he said, "Well, I heard you're an asshole." And this kid was 3 months out of college, and he'd already elevated himself as one of the best engineers very quickly. One of the best engineers in the world, and it was great. I loved it. I said, "You're hired. I need someone to just tell me the way it is."
Right. Keeps it honest.
Yeah.
Keeps transparent. So, shifting out, you sold that first company, $45 million. That was a success story. You did 3 years.
We sold it for $25 million.
$25 million.
$35 million. Believe it or not, $35 million in revenue, but sold it for 25.
Okay.
Things were a little different back then.
That's a huge success story.
It was good.
Yeah. And so now you're an entrepreneur. Even though you put those 3 years in, you were ready to, at some point, go back and start something again. Well, how did that evolve at that point?
Yeah, so I was with DCA, and we merged with our biggest competitor, and the new CEO, the majority shareholder, I was VP of research. He basically said, "I don't believe in research." So made my decision very easy. The internet, there was so much going on in the technology world. This is 1995, and I was like, "All right, I'm out of here. I got a nice nest egg. I can go and try to do it again."
Okay.
So that was an exciting time. Took off 3 months and toured around in my motorcycle diaries, skiing in Colorado, but really sat back and really focused on not making the same mistake we did last time, which was focus on a small market, really find a big market. And to really implement some of I'd worked for 10 years at coming up with an innovation process that I was anxious to sort of try out.
And that translated into what company?
A couple. One is I was becoming on the side, I was just helping companies out, and one of them was internet security systems. So I was one of the first investors. Was one guy, Chris Klaus, gave him some money to help him build that company, which turned out to be really good. But really focused on came up with 100 different product ideas. Most of them were centered around the internet. The internet was very new back then, so it wasn't fait accompli that was the way to go. But we focused on coming with products in that area. So we started with 100 different product concepts, narrowed it down, and DoubleClick was the sort of eventual outcome of that.
And we're going to get into DoubleClick in a minute, but at this point in your career, your parents are more the employment kind of people. They're 8 to 5 kind of people. Where did you have any mentors at this time in your life? Did you have someone that you could call, that you could get guidance from, or were you really feeling like you're really independent?
So my first mentor was actually the first company. We were a bootstrap company, and Bill Miller's dad was on the board, and his dad's friend was on the board. So I felt very much outnumbered. His name was Ralph McIntyre. And Ralph knew nothing about technology. He was a steel guy up in Warren, Ohio. And I really trusted. I felt like I was outnumbered, and I was very insecure. I was 20, 21, 22. And Ralph was my first mentor. Ralph said, "You know what, Kevin? Here's my resignation. Anytime you want me off the board, I'm off the board." So he was the first guy that showed me that, just kind of the Zen.
Mm-hmm.
I will. If you don't trust me, I will completely trust you. And over the years, probably for the next 15 years, I mean, he was a really good mentor to me.
I just saw a TED Talk where the entire thing was about trust, because the word and the concept of trust has evolved so much in the last 10 years. And I think one of the statements that the speakers made was that if an individual is completely vulnerable to you and basically allows you to criticize them, to terminate them, and so forth, and that's the ultimate indication of trustworthiness, if they're putting themselves in that position. Up until that point, had trust been an issue, or did you find that you didn't trust certain people? Did you feel like you were being taken advantage of at times, or was this like a big deal that he really connected with you at that level?
I mean, it was a big deal because I was young, I was immature, so trust was always an issue. You break up with women and stuff like that. You have all those trust issues, and then we were doing a startup. I knew nothing about corporate structures, stock, option. I didn't know anything about it. I didn't know if I was getting screwed or whether it was fair or not.
So you had to trust someone.
Yes.
And it turned out to be this guy. How long was this person in your life?
He's still in the life. I haven't talked to him in a while, but probably 15 years.
Oh, okay.
We talk.
Yeah.
I mean, I think the great thing about a mentor, and mentors are tough to find. It's got to come naturally, but it's got to be this trust thing. He had absolutely no bias. He had nothing to gain. He had no conflict of interest. I mean, he was just telling me the way it is.
Yeah.
He told me if I was being an idiot, if I had problems, I go to him. He would give me honest advice.
Mm-hmm.
It's tough when you work with people. There's always going to be some bias. It's difficult to get rid of that.
Right.
That bias. You try. I try to be very objective in everything I do, but humans are complicated, so can never completely get rid of bias.
How do you go about selecting a management team? You're starting DoubleClick. You've got a good amount of experience under your belt. You now know you're going to go after a much larger market. That was one of the big learning lessons. Trust being so important at an executive level, executive team. How do you go about figuring out who to trust, who you can be vulnerable with? Do you have a process, or is it instinct?
So it's funny when Dwight Merriman and I started DoubleClick, and he's in the basement. Literally, when we decided how to split the company up, it wasn't even a negotiation. I put something on the table. It was what I thought was very, very fair, and Dwight completely trusted me to do that. And he and I have always had this incredible amount of trust. So I think you hear a lot of these horror stories between partners, and it's usually because of that. They don't trust each other. With him and I, it was just everything was trust. I think I've come to learn over the years that it's most people are good. 90% of people you can completely trust, and the other 10%, they may screw me once, but people don't screw me twice because I don't give that opportunity.
Right.
So you hold people up to very, very high ethical standards, and if you get screwed by somebody 2 or 3 times, you're the idiot.
Sure. Yeah, it's interesting. I just had a conversation with one of my partner's employees, and he talked to me about needing a raise, and I asked him how much he wanted. He told me, and I said, okay, let's proceed. I mean, there was no negotiation. It was that simple. It's kind of the same spirit.
There's a great book, Herb Cohen, Anything's Negotiable, and it's a great, great book. And one of his techniques is just that, which is that if you come to a situation where you're at an impasse, you tell the other person, say, look, whatever you decide, I will trust you.
Yeah.
And 9 times out of 10, they will put something very fair.
Yeah, and when I was building my first company, I met a Swedish CEO and founder, entrepreneur kind of guy, and he taught me the concept of logam, which they'd say in Sweden that you would never enter a deal that if they turn the paper 180 degrees, and you had to, basically
Yeah.
subscribe to those terms that you wouldn't sign up for. So it's kind of, you wouldn't want to get into a deal where you feel like the other person is being manipulated or it's not fair.
Yeah, I mean, my whole style of negotiations is that. I mean, yeah, that deal should be long-term, they gotta be successful both sides, and that if I'm gonna ask you for something, I gotta be willing to do take the exact same pain.
Now, as you're building DoubleClick, it seems like it was an accelerating type of company. I mean, it grew quickly and developed quickly. Did you have time to develop mentor relationships, or were you more focused on mentoring at that point in your life?
Yeah, I mean, we had probably a combination of the two. I mean, I was I think maybe 34 when we started DoubleClick, so I was old for the internet. I was still very, very young to be a CEO, but old for an internet CEO. So, and most people we hired, were probably younger or maybe about the same age. But it was when we started bringing in money, I started like the venture capitalists, the guys like Mark Nunley and Dave Strom, and I was fortunate enough to have Tom Murphy on our board, who was CEO of CBS, or is it ABC? Hopefully CBS. Who Warren Buffett described as the best CEO in the United States. And he was just such a great mentor. We just interviewed his granddaughter here the other day. I didn't know at the time it was his granddaughter. We found out afterwards, but just a great human being.
Yeah.
It was always able to synthesize things, very complicated stuff, just to something the simplest terms, and help me out. You knew nothing about the internet, but everything about people and business.
Well, what do you think is one of the critical things that you ought to be looking for when you're trying to find a mentor? You said it comes natural, but if somebody says, okay, I need a mentor, I want a coach, I want someone to advise me, what are some of the things that you think really have to be there, other than trust?
Yeah, I mean, trust is something that you build over time, right? It can be destroyed in a second. So you're always looking for that. First of all, I love when people tell me, you're full of crap, you're wrong, and they tell you. I mean, that's what a mentor should be. A mentor should be completely honest to you, and they tell you things that aren't necessarily in their best interest, right? So you have a VC on board. They have particular vested interest, and our VCs never. They always did what was fair. They always did what was reasonable, for the business, not necessarily for their ownership stake. And, so people demonstrated it. So when they demonstrated through things like that, then you're really open to listen to what they say.
Shifting gears, what has been one of your greatest failures, looking back the last 25 so years?
I was trying to think of that. So, I mean, entrepreneurs tend to repress all failures, and then or we reposition failures as learning experiences. So that's one of them. I mean, probably the biggest one is when I had to step down as CEO of DoubleClick.
Okay, and why was that?
I'm not sure it was a failure. Well, I love to invent products. That's probably my specialty. In the role of the CEO, we become 2,500 people in 25 countries, and I was dealing mostly with the media, lawyers, politicians, and I was no longer dealing with products. So, and we had the .com meltdown was right in the process, as well as we were right in the middle of the privacy. Well, probably near the tail end of the privacy thing. I went to work through that, but I was spending all my time. I basically didn't like my job. I loved the beginning part of the job, and then it evolved into sort of a bureaucrat, and didn't like it. So, how do you effectively lead an organization? So I always wanted to be, I wanted to go out. I always said I'm going to be CEO as long as I'm the best person. When I'm not, you should absolutely make the change. And I wanted to be the one to sort of identify that. And Kevin Ryan was much better suited at doing that. So, I stepped down. I mean, that was a tough decision, and I felt like a failure because I wasn't able to transform myself. But I think you got to recognize your limitations.
Do you have time today to really be a mentor to some of your existing staff and find the best?
Yeah, I mean, I think our average exec team age is probably 25 or 26. It's their first. Most of them is their first job experience, or maybe had a couple of years under the belt someplace else. So I spent a lot of time mentoring.
How often do you mentor? A daily basis, a weekly?
I mean, to me, mentoring is more of it's continuous. It's not like we sit down, I'm going to mentor you. It's okay, what are the issues you're facing? Presenting them with challenges, not giving them solutions to answers, but helping them think through things. You know,
Yeah.
sometimes we had a funny situation. We had a survey question: is there much management training? And you know, most answers were no. In fact, we do continuous management training. You know, we have some formal management training, but it's mostly management training is by doing.
Right.
It's by making sure that you give people situations where they can be successful, where they're going to push themselves and challenge themselves, but have a pretty high degree, a high probability of achieving, you know, what you put out for them. So.
Now you've got Find the Best. It's rolling well. You've got some great venture funding behind it. You guys have been increasing your metrics on a regular basis. Where do you see this company going over the next 2, 3, 5 years?
So our particular industry, you know, you got horizontal search, Bing and Google. That's not going to go anywhere. There's trillions of documents, and they're great at finding that. But over the past 10 years, most of the interesting stuff's been done at the vertical search level. I mean, Amazon for all of commerce, but you got Kayak and all the travel. You've got Zillow and Trilio for real estate. You got Yelp, and Manta for sort of local businesses. We're the only company that has approached this that a platform for developing vertical search. So we're launching into all these major vertical areas we have over the past 4 years, and we're about to launch we are launching into the real estate area. So you know, we want to be the place to research big decisions. So when you think about, I got to buy a car, I got to buy a smartphone, nursing home, real estate, a CRM software, any kind of big decision, we want to be the place you come to research.
Okay.
We're not going to be the only place, but we're going to be, you know, a key trusted source.
Yeah. So the big time decision engine.
Yes.
Big data decision engine.
Yes.
Okay. And within your company, you mentioned that a lot of your team are younger. Is the average age about 25, 26 across the board?
Yeah, almost everyone we recruit is right out of school.
Okay.
85% of people.
Is that by design?
Yeah, I mean, part of it is the area, the location. Santa Barbara is a little funky when it comes to, you know, what's the saying, newlywed or nearly dead or something like that. It's there's a lot of folks like us.
Yeah.
And then there's a lot of really young folks. And we found it to be great to recruit people and bring them here. I'm a huge believer. I mean, you know, Dwight Merriman, who went on to, you know, do DoubleClick and MongoDB. You know, he was right out of school. You know, within 3 months, established himself. You know, most Nobel prizes are done by people in their 20s. It's when your IQ is the highest, and when you have this biggest stamina. And I did a lot of stuff in my 20s, so it just, I love people coming out of universities. They haven't had the creativity beat out of them yet. They're super anxious to change the world, so I like it. It's got some challenges, but.
Yeah. Well, they all need guidance too. So it seems like your ratio is pretty significant in terms of potential mentoring versus the number of kids, I should say kids, but young adults that need mentoring.
Yeah, no, that's probably a big knock, is that people come here and they want to be to learn from experienced people, right? And the experienced person has 2 years more under their belt. So yeah, there's a pretty strong demand for mentorship. So we've had people come in and speak, and we're developing some kind of informal mentors, but
okay,
big need.
Well, great. Anything else you want to share about current activities and, you know, projections and where things are headed?
No.
Not right now.
No. I was always terrible at these. Like, what else would you like to say?
Well, you know, like, do you see a revolution, a trend that you're really excited about over the next 5, 10 years in general, and not necessarily the data warehousing and data decision engineering that you guys are working on? It could be anything.
Yeah, you know, I always think there's these big mega trends come every 7 to 10 years. That's just, it takes people a while to really embrace stuff. You know, the internet clearly huge continuous mega trend. You know, then you had social networking, you got mobile, which is going to continue to become, you know, continue to be the main driver. Outside that, I don't know.
Have
I
you
mean, I
got-
think user-generated content is, we're really harnessing that. I think that, one of our challenges is that a lot of the information is not available. It's locked in the minds of 32 million businesses or in hundreds of millions of consumers' heads or experiences. So how do you unleash that? How do you create a system where you can harness that information? But then you get into, I think couple of big areas is just the whole reputation. What Google did with sort of page rank and everything, reputation of a page, and what's this reputation of information? There's so much disinformation on the internet. There's so much information now. But how much of it is true? How much of it is reputable? How much,
Yeah, verification.
Yeah.
Verification and trust. It's definitely a big deal. Okay, well, fantastic. I appreciate your time, and congratulations on all the success, and hope to see a lot more.
Thank you. Later, man.
Thank you.